Hello and welcome to Squatchspot.com. I'm Darren Smith, and I must apologize for not posting in quite some time. However, these past few weeks, I've been rather busy. January is my birthday month, and two of my dear friends from Louisiana treated me to an epic Disney World, Orlando, Florida Star Wars birthday bash extravaganza. Yes, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I have had the pleasure of visiting some of the many film sites around the world, including Aunt Beru's and Uncle Owen's home and at the City Driss Hotel in Tunisia. Birthdays are a huge deal for me. I'm not celebrating getting older, I'm celebrating life and giving thanks for the many years I've been blessed to have lived. This trip included a visit to Galaxy's Edge at Disney's Hollywood Studios, where we flew the Millennium Falcon in Smuggler's Run, dined on Galactic Delights at Ronto's Roasters, and we joined the Resistance and rode the mind-blowing Rise of the Resistance ride. And if things couldn't get any better, I had the great opportunity to meet Chewbacca. But unfortunately, when I asked him if he was a Sasquatch, I couldn't understand his response. I don't speak Wookiee. And my friends absolutely blew me away with a visit to Savvy's workshop, where I got to build my very own lightsaber. I've always liked the lightsaber in the woods tactic to try to lure in a Sasquatch. It's an unusual light and sound source they would be unfamiliar with, and it may entice them to come in for a closer look. And I was definitely anxious to give it a try on Goat Mountain, an area just outside of Oakhurst, California, that has had numerous Sasquatch sightings, and it has been an area of research for me shortly after I moved into this area. However, this area is still quiet. Returning from Orlando, I caught a very nasty flu bug that had me bedridden for several days. When I worked on board the luxury cruise line for several years, inoculations and flu shots were mandatory, and I never got sick. However, since I am no longer cruising the world, I haven't been getting the flu shots. Big mistake, because this one knocked me on my derriere and it took me nearly 2 weeks to fully recover. I'm also happy to report that I have been busy with work lately, which is a good thing. So I really haven't had the opportunity to get out into the field, which is why I encourage you guys to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you will be notified when I post future videos. But now it's time to grab our gear because we are heading into the field and we are heading into a new area of interest where I think the Sasquatch might just be hanging out. So recently I've received quite a few messages from you guys voicing concerns over my personal safety and well-being while I'm conducting field research. This is especially noteworthy when I'm out in the field alone at night. And yes, I am conducting my research alone unless I'm out on an expedition, and it definitely raises some safety concerns. In fact, this week a 24-year-old has gone missing in the woods of Dinky Creek, California. This is near where I had my sighting and where it's in the same area where I've been conducting my Sasquatch camera project. And there are quite a few voices in the Bigfoot community who believe that the Sasquatch are abducting people. In fact, the Native Americans have been saying it for years. So there are definitely risks involved when venturing into the wilderness. And it's very important that if you are interested in heading into the woods, you educate yourself as to what those risks may be and try to minimize them the best you can. And it's always a much better idea to venture into the woods with a friend. So right now we're investigating an area of interest I've been monitoring for quite some time, which is at a much higher elevation than the areas we have been investigating recently. This time of year, the Sasquatch generally should be down in the Bass Lake area, down there on Goat Mountain Road 426 in North Fork, just outside of Oakhurst, California. However, it doesn't seem to be the case, so I'm assuming that since the weather has been unseasonably warm this year, the Sasquatch are still at these higher elevations. As I mentioned before, the Sasquatch generally stay at the higher elevations in the summertime, and they move down to the lower elevations in the wintertime. However, this area should be absolutely buried in snow this time of year, and there's only a few sporadic patches here and there. So I'm thinking that since the weather is unseasonably warm, the Sasquatch are still at these higher elevations, and I've come up here to investigate this area and to see if we can find any sort of physical evidence to support that the Sasquatch are still up at these higher elevations. So exploring the area, I found this down log, and I think it raises an opportunity for us to look for tracks, because I believe bear and Sasquatch are going to have very similar diets, and I have watched bear tear apart these down logs in search of grubs, and I think the Sasquatch would probably do something similar. And what I like about this area here is that the ground is really moist. Perhaps this is where there was a patch of snow that has melted off, leaving the ground super moist, which is a perfect medium to find footprints. Continuing to investigate the area, I discovered a rather intriguing stack of rocks in a very remote area. Though I do suspect this rock stack is the result of human activity, I could not find any tangible evidence to confirm this, and I had no clear understanding why the rock stack was created. With the temperature dropping rapidly and a storm front moving in, I did not have the time to conduct a proper investigation of the rock stack or its surrounding area, and I reluctantly had to abandon the area. But I did tag the rock stack on my GPS unit with the hopes to return to the area in the near future to conduct a proper investigation. So it's getting rather late, and I have quite a trek to take to get back to my vehicle, and then I have quite a drive to make to get back into town. So I am going to start heading out. It has gotten incredibly cold. I put on my gloves, and the fog has rolled in, and visibility is really limited. It's down to maybe about 50 feet, so that's going to create an interesting element on the trek out. But I do think it was great that we came up here to investigate this area that I have been monitoring. I do think it's a good location, and I think it was the wise choice after we weren't getting the activity we were hoping for down at those lower elevations near Road 426, Bass Lake, North Fork, and of course Goat Mountain, to come up to these higher elevations and to see if they are still up in these higher elevations. And although we didn't find any conclusive physical evidence that the Sasquatch are up here in these higher elevations still, I do think that rock stack is very intriguing. I honestly do not understand why humans would put a rock stack in such a random location in the middle of the woods here. So that rock stack is very intriguing to me, and I will definitely be tagging it on my GPS unit, and I will be coming back into this area to continue investigating it. However, I don't think this area is going to be accessible too much longer. I think we do have snow in the forecast in the coming weeks, so we might not be able to get up here, but it's definitely an area of interest that I will be continuing my investigations. I was very disappointed having to abandon the area after discovering that intriguing rock stack. However, I wasn't equipped for an overnight stay, and although paved, the road leading out of the area is not maintained this time of year, and motorists often encounter rock slides or fallen trees on the road, which seriously impedes travel through the area. And the storm system that was moving in could cause a potentially dangerous situation if it brought heavy snow. So I was forced to abandon the area. However, surprisingly, it was not for long. As luck would have it, there was a break in the storm a couple of days later, and I was excited to get back up into this area of interest to do a proper investigation of the rock stack we discovered, and to continue exploring the area. But before heading into the woods, I wanted to spend some time investigating the roadside. Animals often cross roads in set locations, and discovering these locations can greatly help us in our search for Sasquatch evidence, as the Sasquatch are very likely to be crossing the road at these same locations. So when you're out looking for Sasquatch, there's a couple of strategies you may want to consider. One such strategy is to spend a little time along the roadways in the area. I think generally animals like to take the path of least resistance, and I think considering the majority of the Sasquatch reports being filed are taking place along roadways, I think the Sasquatch may actually be using our roadways as a path of least resistance. So I think it's very advantageous as researchers to spend a little time investigating them. And if you can find a road that's running parallel to a water source, that's even more ideal. This road is running parallel to a flowing river that's flowing just down in this ravine. So that means the animals that are up in this forest behind me, they are going to have to move down these embankments, cross the road to get to that water source. So that means these embankments along the road here are going to be an ideal location for us to be looking for Sasquatch tracks. What's nice about searching for tracks along roadways and on these embankments is that the ground is usually relatively free of forest debris, so it really does increase our chances of finding clear tracks. However, there is one very important note to make. If you are going to investigate roadways, always remember safety first, and do not investigate along busy highways or roads, and be extremely careful of vehicle traffic. Always make certain you are not on the road and that you are always out of harm's way. While investigating this roadway, I did discover a couple of game trails where the animals were crossing the road, and I found quite a bit of physical evidence of animal activity. Besides a bunch of deer tracks and coyote scat, I did find a few interesting impressions. These impressions were discovered heading down an embankment near where I discovered a multitude of deer tracks, and although these tracks are inconclusive, what I do like about them is the general size and shape of the tracks and the consistency noted between them. Also, what I found even more compelling was the fact that I discovered identical sized and shaped impressions on the opposite side of the road, leading down the ravine towards the river. As a bear moves about, it can happen that one of its hind paws lands on top of one of the impressions of one of its front paws, and it can create an elongated track that has the appearance of a large footprint. However, this is pretty random and doesn't happen consistently, and also claw marks should be visible on the impression. The impressions I discovered along this trackway were too consistent in size and shape to have been created by a bear, and there were no clear claw marks visible on any of the impressions. Could these tracks have been from a Sasquatch? Possibly. This is a very good location with a strong history of sightings. However, I still place them in the inconclusive category. The impressions were a little over 11 inches long, which is a little small even for a juvenile Sasquatch, and the tracks were too weathered and lacking detail needed to get a definitive identification. However, these impressions have raised some enthusiasm that we may be in the right place, and I will definitely be closely monitoring these roadside game trails in the future. I spent a considerable amount of time investigating the roadway and the various game trails I discovered, and I made a trek down into the ravine towards the river, following the curious impressions I found. There, I spent quite some time observing the environment. However, nothing noteworthy occurred. Anxious to investigate the curious rock stack we discovered during our last outing, I began the long trek into the woods, following the GPS coordinates I had tagged on our previous trip. So I've been up here for several hours now investigating this area, and I think this is the most interesting thing we've encountered so far. This rock stack that you see behind me here. I think it's a really interesting configuration with the several rocks on top of each other and these two rocks here. This one looks like it might have fallen off, but maybe it was intentionally placed there. And then we have this rock over here that also looks intentionally placed. I am going to look around. I have noticed there's some other interesting rock configurations on this embankment. We're kind of on a steep slope here. And I am going to look around to see if I can find any sort of physical evidence to indicate what made these rock stacks behind me. So I've investigated this area trying to find any sort of physical evidence to support what created this rock stack behind me, but I really cannot find any sort of tangible evidence. But I don't think that this is Sasquatch related. The rock stacks that I'm finding that are appearing near my camera project and the other proposed Sasquatch rock stacking that I've encountered have all been very subtle, not so grandiose as this. So I think what's happening here, I think this is a rock stack that is giving instructions and directions here. You see we have 6 rocks stacked here, and we have these 2 rocks here. I think the stacked rocks are indicating a distance, and I think these 2 rocks here are indicating a direction. So I'm going to assume that each rock is either 50 or 100 feet. So I think what we should do is I think we should head into this direction 600 feet and see what we find. So following the GPS unit, we have arrived at this location where clearly there's a major project taking place. It looks like they are removing a lot of the dead trees that are the result of the bark beetle infestation. You can see in the background there are some trees that have some blue paint markings on them, and I believe that indicates that those trees are also going to be taken down and removed. So I think we've solved the mystery of our rock stack. I absolutely believe that it is a signpost communicating direction and distance for the individuals who are involved in this project. Though not quite as exciting as a Sasquatch lair or a hidden treasure, I do believe we solved the mystery of that curious rock stack. And although we did not find any conclusive evidence the Sasquatch are still up at these higher elevations, it is clear there is a lot of recent animal activity happening in the area, and those impressions we discovered were intriguing. So, taking into consideration the unseasonably warm temperatures we have been experiencing in the area and the lack of snow, I do believe we are on the right track exploring these higher elevations, and I think we should continue with this approach until the weather changes and these areas are no longer accessible. So until next time, I'm Darren Smith, and I'll see you here at Squatchspot.com.